if you read any book on investing and the fundamentals of wealth building, there's 3 ways to build wealth in this world. There's business, there's property, and there's shares. But the common theme for most of them is that they've got to a point where they realize that they're not earning the kind of money they thought they would at this stage of business. They're like, I get to 7 figures and I've made it. I'm driving a Lambo and doing all these things. And it's not the case, right? Like success in anything, doesn't matter if it's business or anything in life, I think comes down to 4 things. 1, you got to be curious. Like great business leaders and great people at anything are always curious. They're always looking for a better way, right? They don't accept the status quo. They're always testing.
Welcome to the Level Me podcast, where we rise to the level of those around us. And today we have Jackson Milan from Aureus Financials. Jackson, welcome.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's good to be here.
Mate, I'm really impressed. You've just literally flown in from Brisbane. You've come down to the GC. You caught up with your business partner. You're in the GC. We're going out for dinner.
Yeah.
And you got a massive event this week. So it's no rest for the wicked, hey?
Mate, they don't call me Action Jackson for nothing.
I love it. Well, it wouldn't be too unusual for you because I know you've got the farm and I know that keeps you pretty busy as well at home, but it's a different kind of busy, right?
It is a different busy, but it's good to be in the hustle and bustle for a bit. Live up in Cairns on 70 acres. It's a little bit different than the finger wolves at GC, mate.
How many animals have you got now?
Over 100.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we were saying just before, it only takes you like half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon to maintain the minimum.
Exactly.
But then a few hours afterwards as well.
Yeah, we've got a good system. So the animals are all free range. We let them out in the morning. They do their thing. We give them some feed and then make sure that they're put away in the afternoon, particularly all the birds, because we've got lots of snakes and things that are trying to knock them off.
True.
I'm very well known on social media for my snake wrangling videos. It's always good fun.
It's crazy. And the funniest thing you said when you flew in was like, man, it's really cold. And I'm like, I'm here sweating.
Yeah.
I can imagine how hot it gets.
100%.
How hot does it get up there?
Look, it's not that hot in temperature, but it's the humidity that gets it. So it's
Yeah.
typically like 30, 35 degrees most days, but like it's 80% humidity, 100% humidity in summer. Okay. It gets
sweaty.
Pretty sweaty, mate.
I saw a video where you were like manufacturing this dam.
Yeah.
And you're like blocking it off with logs and everything else. And then you hopped in the dam and I was like, man, that looks so satisfying.
It's the best. So our place, we live in the rainforest. And then down the side of our house, we've got this freshwater creek that runs all year. And we've got a waterfall that runs past so we can hear it at night. And it is just so hot, particularly in the middle of the day. So to retreat into the rainforest and be able to have our own little private swimming pool, it's great because that's the only place there's no crocs.
Really? There's no crocs?
Yeah, so we border onto about a kilometre of river frontage called the Russell River, and it's probably one of the most densely populated rivers of crocs in Australia. So there's a big croc called Big Clyde that we call him, and he's pushing about 5 metres.
Oh.
So he's a big boy.
Wow,
He's a big boy.
I'd probably be staying out of the water altogether.
I think so. Yeah.
At least you got a little dam. So I was lucky enough to go to your last event in the GC and found it super valuable. Like not only did I get to meet heaps of really cool people, business owners, understand what they're doing, what's working for them and network that way, but heaps of education around business, property, like all sorts of things and like setting up your buckets. Like you just went into so much detail in the smallest amount of time, but like nailed everything really well.
Thank you, mate.
What's the whole agenda or thought process or reasoning behind the events?
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. My story begins, my parents were business owners. Dad was a tradie, mum was a hairdresser. They were both really good at what they did. They took a lot of pride in their work. They'd won awards. They just basically tried to become the best technicians they possibly could. And they thought that being a great technician means that you're going to be successful. And they were successful from the respect of their craft, but they were never financially successful. And we always lived hand to mouth. There was always unpaid bills and we're always kind of struggling to make ends meet. And like I never went without anything as a kid. I don't really recall ever as a kid thinking that I was like poor, but I always felt this sense of guilt ever asking my parents for anything because I knew how much they needed to sacrifice to provide for me. So in my childhood, I was always very entrepreneurial, but I realized pretty early on that they were working for money as opposed to money working for them. And I'd seen like this generational cycle of all of my past generations of family members, and either whether they were alive, I could observe it, or the stories that I was told of just hardship and just the Aussie battlers, right? I'm like, I've got to do something different here. So I decided that I was going to become a financial advisor, and I basically started training in that and started working for the big banks. And immediately just disheartened because my experience was in this place called the Financial Advice Centre, and this was the closest thing to what you could envision out of The Wolf of Wall Street, right? Just like everything except the midget throwing. Honestly, it was bad. You could smell the toxicity in the air of this bullpen of hundreds of reps, inner city Sydney, and selling commission-based products to people like my parents who quite frankly didn't need them. And I go, if this is what financial advice is, I don't want a part of it. And I very quickly realised that the industry, at least what I'd observed, just wanted to make wealthy people wealthier or sell these shitty products to vulnerable people like my parents. And in a fleeting thought, I go, well, if you're not going to fix it, who will? And then I committed my entire career to calling myself a wealth coach and learning everything I possibly could about the language of money and helping people like my parents get their money working for them from the very, very beginning. And fast forward 16 years, I've helped my clients build over $3 billion in combined wealth. And we've been able to scale an 8-figure business now called Aureus Financial. And the cornerstone of everything is always education. The interesting thing I realized is for the vast majority of people, they think that they're not financial people and they try and abdicate responsibility. And there's nothing that you can do in life or business when abdicated that is going to get you significant results. You just can't do it. You must understand the context of what it is that you're trying to do, and you can outsource it, but you can only outsource from a position of knowing. Because otherwise you're just going to get taken advantage of. You're not going to be able to measure somebody's results. You're just vulnerable. So our whole value proposition has been around education, and really that's what I've committed my career to. And
I love it. It's such a, especially with the crossover in our space, is like I'm very heavily in the residential property investment space and commercial, but there's so much red tape from the financial planning perspective because they don't want to cross that property threshold, and people were getting kickbacks and commissions on all sorts of things. So there's so much red tape around it, and then you got the other side of it as well, as like, well, anyone else who wants to talk about another financial product is, financial advice, so you can't do it. So there's always been this kind of like two parties, and then like, where is a line? Where do you cross the line? All that sort of stuff. It's pretty crazy. But like, I mean, obviously you've probably seen the industry change a little bit over your time. Yeah. Has it gotten any better, or is it still pretty hectic out there?
Look, there's lots of varying perspectives, and from working in the big banks and working with a lot of boutique financial advisors, most financial advice businesses were built on this idea of funds under management, and which is typically people who are already independently wealthy that bring their money to a financial advisor who manages the portfolio for them, typically for a percentage-based fee, typically 1%. And of course, the economics of that is you want to manage bigger portfolios, right? Because you're going to make more money. And for that reason, and I always disagreed with it because I'm like, well, there's a fundamental conflict of interest, because it means that I'm going to put in less effort with my smaller clients and I'm going to put in more effort with my bigger clients. And I'm only remunerated based on the products that I can manage. So therefore, I can't consider property and I can't consider their business, which seems short-sighted to me. Like if you read any book on investing and the fundamentals of wealth building, there's 3 ways to build wealth in this world. There's business, there's property, and there's shares. Each of them have pros and cons. Each of them can work together. And the idea of building a really robust and diversified portfolio is trying to use all of them and complement them together, right? And so therefore I'm like, okay, well, how do I build a value proposition that strips out all of that conflict of interest? I've always charged fee for service. I've always charged based on outcomes, not time. And I've always charged for strategy, the value that I bring to the table, as opposed to the products or that kind of thing, right? I've always tried to be very agnostic. So ever since I started my career in my business, I've always had property as a primary asset class in our client strategies. And I've had so many people come to me and say, like, why are you doing that? Like this and that. Once again, it's up to personal preference. My job is not to ram my thoughts or beliefs down a client's throat. My job is to educate them around the value of various ways they can go about achieving financial freedom and help them make the best decision for them. And the best way to do that is to be agnostic, right? So look, I think my vision of the industry should be that property should form part of a financial advice, a financial plan, and vice versa. I think there should be more of the compliance and red tape that exists in the property industry that exists in financial advice, because there are a lot of cowboys out there. But I think we're a long way from that kind of change happening. Who knows if it'll ever happen.
It's almost like it's too big to unfold, right?
There's not a lot of incentive for the regulators to get involved. So I think they leave sleeping dogs lie. And I think that's really where the role of educators can come in, and also, I guess, the role of software platforms as well, because people, because there is so much knowledge out there, it's so easy to access it through TikTok and social media these days, and there's a thirst for it that I don't believe was there. It's growing in popularity, that educators like myself and platforms like Game Plans are just going to continue to thrive because there's a significant market demand for those kinds of things.
Well, I love you say that because I've always struggled with, well, where is the line for Game Plans? And for the listeners of this podcast, I run a software business called Game Plans, which is an online property portfolio management system. And essentially we help forecast out over 30 years where their property portfolio is going to go. And when you talk about financials and forecasting, like immediately you think financial advice, but we try and stick out of that because it's just property itself.
Just assumptions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I love the way that the concept that you've come up with your business, because it's something that I've always struggled with. And it would be one of those things for you where you're kind of like, well, I know what property's done for me. I've seen what it's done for others. Yeah. How could I not educate and teach people about this one of three category of asset classes that will help them build wealth? Like
100%.
It would blow my mind how you could have someone give advice on just one financial product or just one particular thing. I think you actually need to sit someone down, look at their goals, aspirations, businesses, assets, portfolio holistically, and just go, well, these are all components of the much bigger picture. It's not just property. It's not just shares. It's not just business. These are the things that we need to do holistically together. And you tie that in with what we learned at your last event, which is all about allocating your funds in a certain area and managing them properly and not using a credit card and like all these particular things for a reason. All of them come together. I just can't understand. And I stand with you. Like I just couldn't picture a world where you could only do one thing or give advice on one thing when you're really looking out for a client's financial well-being, bigger picture, right?
Bang on. And look, it's interesting that the things that most financial advisors don't touch, which is like the cash flow and the property piece and the strategy piece, are the areas that we can drive the most value. And like in our own business, where we drive the most value for our clients. So we typically work with business owners. Now, most of our clients are multi-six-figure, seven-figure, eight-figure business owners. And they've got a successful business, like in terms of they've achieved these milestones, right? But the common theme for most of them is that they've got to a point where they realize that they're not earning the kind of money they thought they would at this stage of business. They're like, I get to seven figures and I've made it. I'm driving a Lambo and doing all of these things. And it's not the case, right? And we kind of position as like, you know how to make money, but you don't know how to keep it. And the fundamental skill that those people lack is strategic planning and cash flow control. Is that just as soon as that money comes into their hands, it slips through their fingers and they just don't know where it's going. So we basically focus on kind of a couple of things. One, we focus on how do we actually get them clear on what it is they're actually trying to achieve outside of their business, because business, property and shares is just a vehicle to get you to a destination. You must get clear on where you're actually trying to go first. And once we get clear on that, we can reverse engineer that backwards. And we've got a methodology that's called the Freedom Framework, where we reverse engineer what that financial freedom looks like, all the way back down to the number of leads they need to produce in their business. And we show them the unit economics of every stage through that pyramid to say, hey, if you pull this lever, this is the impact it's going to have on your ability to create financial freedom. So it completely reframes the conversation. And they go, oh shit, I didn't realize it has that much impact. And then we help them implement structure to control that cash flow and then allocate it. Because I think one of the biggest issues I see, particularly in this day and age, also with how property's gone crazy, is there's so many people out there that have just given up hope. That they go, I know I need to get more property, or I need to get on the property ladder in the first place, or I know I need to buy businesses, or I know I need to do these things, but it's just too late for me, or I need to achieve X, Y, Z in my business before I can be in a position to do that. And I understand the logical thought, but we need to approach it the complete opposite way, that we need to quantify that gap and then work out the fastest possible way to bridge it. And it's much faster than most people think.
But how if we went back in time in history, how many people do you reckon have always said, it's too late? Like there's this video that circles, right? It's from like the 1970s or something. There's this couple that just missed out on an auction on a property or a block of land or something like that. Have you seen it? Yeah. And they're like, I don't know how much it was.
It's
like
20 grand.
Yeah, it's 20 grand. It's so ridiculous. No one's ever going to be able to afford it. How crazy. And it's just hilarious how we can look back on that now and go, mate, I would have bought 50 of those things if I could.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
It's funny. A friend of mine, Rich Harvey, he's a buyer's agent, and he had an analogy of this. He's like, whenever your parents ever told you the property they bought in the 1980s or whatever, ever said, oh yeah, but I overpaid by like $1,000. I can't believe that I paid $31,000 instead of $30,000. No one's ever said that, right? Everything is expensive when you compare it to history, right? So I think it's about how do we make the best decisions today? And it's just people need to know their numbers and understand what are the levers that they can pull in their life and their business in order to accelerate their path, because it's certainly not easy. Right? Like, there's nobody that I know has built an immense amount of wealth the easy way. And if they did, they've typically taken it for granted and they've lost it, right? True wealth is hard earned.
Yep.
And just because it's hard doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be complicated.
Totally agree. So we know the Jackson today. We know where your values stand. We know what your business does. But how did we get here? Where's the history of Jackson? Last time we talked, I think you had a few businesses beforehand before you started your current one, right?
Yeah, so my business career was not a great start. And I was working for a Big Four bank as a financial advisor. And my dad got diagnosed with stomach cancer. And he was the breadwinner of his household. I was living outside of the house at the time, but he had a young school-aged daughter. He had a homemaker wife. And all of his income come to a grinding halt. And he never allowed me to sit down with him and sort out his personal insurances. He goes, it's sorted, don't worry about it, it's all covered. And then he got this stomach cancer. He was very, very sick, almost died, couldn't work for over 12 months. And he finally gave me the opportunity to look at what was supposed to be his income protection policy. And it was a credit card protection policy that waived his minimum repayments on a credit card for 12 months. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on, right? So the burden of all of the household mortgage and bills and everything fell on my shoulders. Oh. At the exact same time, fortuitously, I went through my first corporate restructure and managed to keep my job, but had a 20% pay cut. So I was frustrated, right? Like, I'm in this environment, working for a Big Four bank, trying to climb the corporate ladder. It wasn't really for me. Had this pay cut, and I'm like, wow, I need to look for something else. And I was in a club in the King's Cross one weekend where all good stories start. And I met this bloke, this just unassuming bloke. And I go, what do you do? And he goes, I'm a fashion designer. And he handed me a business card. And I go, what do you mean you're a fashion designer? And he took me through it. And he goes, like, I set up this e-commerce site and I started this brand. I'm making all of this money. And the thought went through my head and I go, if this guy can do it, I can do it. So I built this business completely out of ego. Never built a website, never run ads, never designed clothing in my life, never dealt with sourcing. This entire business was just a creation of my ego. And it was essentially designed to bridge this cash flow gap that we had in the household. And it was called Siete Clothing Co. And we scaled it up. It got to multi-six figures, but it was a cash-eating monster. Almost set me broke. So it was just this compounding effect of the cash flow deficit in the household, funding stock and constantly going through all of this kind of seasonal shifts of trying to scale this business. And I just didn't understand the economics of it all. And frankly, I didn't enjoy it. And I got to a point where I almost went bankrupt. Yeah. And I come to a crossroads and I go, well, okay, I either need to hit this big red reset button and go bankrupt and wait for 7 years for the slate to be clean and then start again, or I need to find a way to earn myself out of this situation because I'm fucked. And that's what I decided to do. So I quit my job. I went all in on my consulting and my advisory business. I got fortunate enough to get an equity opportunity in a financial advisory business that was pretty dire straits, and they wanted me to turn it around. And over the course of 12 months, we turned that to being number one in the country within this particular branch network. And over the 18 months from when we started to that point, I'd completely cleared all of my bad debt and basically started again from scratch. And that was essentially the kind of full commitment to what I was doing, and everything kind of fell into place from there. Sold that business and did very well, and we started Aureus Financial 7 years ago. And we did a capital raise.
Nice.
Which was
how was that process?
Interesting. It was good. I guess, look, once again, it was a bit of ego, but I think my business partner that I started the business with and I had been in this previous business that we'd achieved a level of scale. And we realized we were just a pawn on somebody else's chessboard because it was a franchise. And we'd already scaled it to number one. Like, where to from here? There's nowhere else we can go. So we decided, okay, well, let's consolidate, let's sell, and then let's start again from scratch. But how do we pick up as much momentum as we possibly can? The only way to do that is to raise capital, because we just didn't want to bootstrap the whole thing. It was great. We raised $500,000, and we focused on acquisitions. And we essentially had this business plan where we'd mapped out all of these acquisitions that we were going to do, and they were all going to be easy. And as soon as we bought these businesses, every single one of the clients was going to be impressed with us and buy everything that we had to offer. None of that happened. And what we quickly realized is that although acquisitions is fantastic, it's a great way to grow, the revenue synergies that most people expect from acquiring a business, if okay, I'm going to buy this business that has a different service that I'm offering, and then I'm going to sell them my stuff and they're going to sell their stuff to my clients, that's the last thing that ever happens. It always takes twice as long and it's half as effective as what you think it's going to be. So we basically got a schooling in mergers and acquisitions, and we developed that strategy over the course of the last kind of 7 years, and we've turned it into a kind of a flourishing business, which has been great. So we've got a team of 35 now, and it's been one hell of a ride.
What a skill set together though, like the mergers and acquisitions thing would be really cool. I remember asking you off the back of the event last year. I think it'd just be cool to experience and learn it and go through all the mistakes, but learn from them as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting, dude. I love the mergers and acquisitions space because of the ability to accrete and create value if you do it right. And the interesting thing, and like, once again, we did all of the wrong things. We thought that we're going to go into these acquisitions trying to buy these decent businesses for chips, like cheap as chips.
Yeah.
Like, let's negotiate them hard. Let's build this financial model that maximizes the value as soon as we bring it in. We're basically treating these vendors as idiots. Like, these people just have no idea what they've got. So we're just going to beat them down on price. And for any of the acquisitions that we managed to get over the line in the early days on those kinds of terms were shit businesses. And they were just a nightmare. And it's interesting now that I've kind of advanced my learning on this stuff. Warren Buffett had the same strategy, right? And it was only when he got into business with Charlie Munger where Charlie goes, mate, trying to buy these shitty businesses for bottom dollar is a stupid strategy. Go buy great businesses at a fair price, and you're not going to have headaches, and they're just going to do their thing. And that's essentially how they've built Berkshire Hathaway. And so that's very much my mantra now. How do we go and buy really good businesses at a fair price? And essentially my whole value proposition is how do we build a horizontally aligned group of businesses that essentially aims to serve 6 and 7 figure service businesses and assist them with high value products and services across everything they're ever going to need to grow and scale their business and grow and scale their wealth.
I love that messaging, and the reason I love it is it's so core to you, and like that's what I know your business as, and I think you do a really, really good job of just honing in on that messaging. Like I think for us as a software company, yeah, I can explain what we do, but I haven't nailed like exactly what we do. Like if my wife tried to explain to a random what I did for work, she'd be like, oh, he just runs a software company. Like she couldn't explain it properly. I love that you've nailed down what your business actually does and who your target market is and how you gather it. I think that's really important. And a big takeaway for anyone who's listening, like if you're struggling with your messaging or not sure, if you couldn't explain it in a conversation what your business does within half a sentence, like really work on that, because I think you do a really good job of that.
Thank you, mate. Lots of iterations, I tell you. Our messaging was so vague, and I look back on it and I fucking cringe. It's so bad. And it's such a journey because it is that battle of ego, right? In any service business, just because you can help everyone doesn't mean you should. And in fact, the more people you try and help, the less effective you are at helping any of those people. So the more you can niche, and I think you need to have a niche business that either does one core thing for a lot of different people or a lot of things for one type of person. And that's essentially what we've tried to build an ecosystem around, is that our people are those 6 and 7 figure service businesses. Sure, we do get some clients that are 8 figures, even 9 figures, but they're outliers. And it's usually because they've had some kind of secret sauce where they've scaled far beyond their ability, but they've still got 6 and 7 figure problems. And once they get too big, then it becomes a different set of problems that we're not best to solve. And it's just about, okay, how do we solve those core things? And really all of the businesses that I acquire, anything I do must revolve around 3 pillars. We have to drive profit, we need to help our clients buy back time, or we need to help them build wealth. And if it doesn't align with any of those 3 things, we don't do it.
I love how you have also come to that conclusion through the, failures and wins. Like you've probably acquired different, but you started with the shit businesses and you quickly realize, well, actually, if there's a business owner who's running a business that's not the greatest or is struggling, well, of course they're going to sell it to me for a low price because they just want to get rid of the thing. And then all of a sudden you're holding on to this dog's breakfast going like, well, these clients are useless. They're not going to, purchase all our products. It's not going to be as streamlined as we were.
Yeah.
And then, you probably have had those acquisitions that might have been a bit too high, or like much bigger companies, or like worked with clients that do have massive companies and gone like, yeah, we can help you, but you also have bigger problems than, 99% of the clients that we service. And so through trial and error over the 7 years, you've obviously gone like, this is what we're super good at. And this is just what we're going to focus on to help them do those 3 pillars.
And I wish I was smart enough to say that I discovered that on my own. It was really interesting. The tipping point for us is we did this market research project with our clients, and we called about 30 or 40 different clients and asked them this set of questions. And up until that point, we thought that we were really clear on what our clients were buying from us. And that was in all of our messaging and all of our positioning and all of our marketing. We're like, fuck, this isn't working. We're not getting cut through. Why don't these people understand like the value that we're bringing to the table? It's because they didn't want it. And when we interviewed all of these clients into this market research project, the penny dropped, and just all of them said a very similar thing. And it was essentially that they were buying peace of mind and certainty from us. It was just, they wanted that clarity of direction. They wanted confidence in what they needed to do. And once we started shifting that messaging, and obviously some of the problems they were talking around these cash flow bottlenecks and just this lacking of financial systems and sophistication, and we started using all of the things that they were saying in the market research, and our marketing just caught fire. And it just, we're like, wow, okay, now we've got it. So you got to ask the people.
It's funny when you hit that 1 or 2 things and then it just blows up and you're like, okay, finally figured that one out.
That's it. The hard lessons.
So 35 staff.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. How has the business progressed over the 7 years to get you to that point? So obviously you mentioned you started it with a partner.
Yeah.
Was it just you two to begin with?
Yeah, so just us two, and then our kind of silent partner who we raised capital from.
Yep.
Who was a successful investor, and he just didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day operations.
And it was just one person?
Just one person.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we met with so many different people, and once again, probably big egos. We had this business plan, and my original business plan had 2 points in the executive summary. We will never float and we will never sell. The 2 things that get professional investors really excited, right? Is that we're never going to have a liquidity event. How the fuck am I going to get my money out? I can't believe that I put that in the business plan, but it was just, I think, putting myself back into that position. My philosophy was like, we're so in on this. Like, this is my life's work, and we're going to manufacture so much value. Why would we ever exit? And sure, we want to create liquidity events for our partners along the way, but I probably didn't put myself in their shoes, right? So I was very high conviction in terms of me and my vision and everything, not so much for the investor. But this investor really saw our potential and backed us, and it worked out really well. They got a very good return on investment. And our original business plan was like, okay, we're going to own this horizontally aligned conglomerate, which is going to have financial advice, mortgage broking, property advisory, tax and accounting, business services, right? And we're going to own all of the shares in all of these businesses, and we're just going to employ people to run them for us. Easier said than done. And it's interesting to try and create intrinsic drive and motivation in a startup from employees was really hard. And we got to a point of just burnout where we're like, we've got to find a better way to do this. Like, we've got to share some of this pie. And what we developed was a roll-up strategy. So essentially our philosophy then became, okay, we're good operators. We've developed this system for doing acquisitions and handling the operations and just doing all of the stuff that most small business owners don't want to do. How do we go and find people who are expert technicians in all of these verticals of business, roll their business into ours and essentially do what we call a script for script rollover, where we'll trade in the value of their business for the equivalent value in that entity, and then give them a pathway and an option to have an ownership stake in the whole group on the basis that they hit certain performance metrics and they can add value at a group level as opposed to just at a siloed level. And we rinse and repeated that strategy. Found really good people who were great technicians, hated the operations stuff, and just, I think in many ways, were lonely. Like, they wanted a partner, somebody who they could solve problems with and that they could vent to and that would help them with the stuff that didn't come naturally to them. And that's been our growth strategy.
Cool. So the roll up is essentially, if you've acquired a business, the business owner, all the employees within that business would come on board, and then you'd roll them up into the bigger. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Which comes with the challenges.
Yeah, it would.
But there's always challenges, right? Like, it's interesting. You think at scale the problems get easier, And they don't. The problems only get bigger. The thing that changes is your ability to navigate those problems because of the tacit knowledge and skill that you've developed over the course of a stressful career. But I love it. Like, I thrive in that environment. And what some people see as stressful is a dream for me, right? And I love to solve these problems. So I look forward to the continued problems that we have at scale, and I welcome them because you can't escape them.
Yeah.
If you don't want problems, don't scale.
Are there the same problems within each business, or does it just get like bigger problems and more dramatic, like just bigger stresses, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, the business will grow at the biggest choke point, right?
Okay.
And there's a constraint that will exist. And typically for most kind of small service business, and we break this into 5 stages. So there's like your 200 grand level in terms of annual revenue. And at that point, you're just trying to prove the model, right? It's damage control, okay? You got to prove something works. I'm pretty confident that I can sell $200,000 of most things, right? It's not a hard business to scale, right? So got to prove the model. Then from 200 to 500, you're trading time for money. And this really comes to the point where, particularly if you're a technical founder, like you've got the skill set, you're the technician, you're the software developer, or you're the real estate agent or the buyer's agent or the advisor or whatever it is, you're a technician, but you're also now trying to build a team and you're wearing 2 hats. And the big issue comes there is that you're trying to manage the people that you're bringing in, and instead of creating a system that manages the people. That means you're perpetually putting out fires. And then we get to a point where ideally when we get up to about $1 million, we should be trading money for time. We should be buying back our time. Like sacrificing margin, and that hurts the ego, right? Is a sacrifice margin, buy back time, disconnect effort from income. And then from that $1 million to kind of 5 mil is where we basically start trading money for money because we've got true leverage. And it's only on the basis that we've got a proven value proposition and a model that's scalable, and that financial model needs to evolve over time. We've then got systems that allow us to consistently deliver an exceptional product so your people aren't missing you, and because otherwise it just becomes the Jackson or the Jordan show, right? We don't want that. And then we need to then create a scale system that allows us to rinse and repeat that strategy. So ultimately, the choke points are always going to come down to 4 things: marketing, sales, delivery, or growth.
Yep.
And we've developed a kind of a scorecard, a diagnostic process where for most businesses, we can identify what that choke point is and then implement solutions to solve it. And then it's just a matter of working out the next one.
Implementing it's smart. I think and I've experienced this personally, but a lot of business owners talk about they get to a certain revenue number and for whatever reason, they're just stuck there for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. And there's it's definitely one of the 4 things that you said, but a lot of people put it down to like, well, it's like my mental capacity, or there's like something in the back of my head that I'm not thinking, and it's a me problem. It's not actually a you problem. There's been 1 million businesses out there that have all gone through the same problems, and it is one of those 4 things. You just got to figure out, number 1, what it is, and number 2, how to solve it.
Yes.
And I think not a lot of people reinvest in themselves or reinvest in that education around, well, that, who are the mentors or who are the people that are going through this or have been through this or can guide me through this to help me break through that barrier and being able to get through it. Because I'm the same. Like I'll have, 2 or 3 really good months, and then all of a sudden, like I'm hitting a really great number and I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then I'm there for 5 months or 6 months and I'm like, how can you all of a sudden have this massive growth spurt and then not do anything additionally on top of that? And then you kind of got to recognize that and look back and go, well, what did I do? Or is this a new level that I need to now increase, or whatever it might be? So do you feel when you do these acquisitions or you bring someone on board and roll them up, there is like someone just sitting there with that mental barrier going like, well, we haven't been able to scale past 200K or half a mil or a mil?
Yeah, I trace it down to a few things. When you focus on the right things, you get the right results. And I guess you've also got to acknowledge how long the right things need to be done for in order to get the right result. Because in many cases, I've seen people, they're actually doing the right thing. It's just that they've cut it too soon. I've been guilty of this too, right? And the only way that you do that is that the decision that you're making can't be a leap of faith. There must be some sort of model of thinking that supports the activity that's being done. Okay, if I do this activity and I do it for this amount of time, I'm pretty confident it should produce this result. And if it doesn't, then I need to start looking at alternatives. So that is something you can do confidently, as opposed to like, I'm going to give this a crack and see how it goes. right? Because then we've got no measure. It's very subjective, and then our emotions seep in and that self-limiting belief. So I think like success in anything, doesn't matter if it's business or anything in life, I think comes down to four things. One, you got to be curious. Like great business leaders and great people at anything are always curious. They're always looking for a better way, right? They don't accept the status quo. They're always testing. Second thing, they're committed. Like my fundamental belief on wealth and success is that if you want to be rewarded more than average, you need to be prepared to do more than average. So you must be more committed than the average person. You must do more than your competitors. You must stand out more than them. You need to be more valuable than them. Third part is perseverance. You can have anything you want for as long as you're prepared to stick at it long enough. And most people are just impatient these days, particularly with the pressures of social media and all of these like overnight success stories that they see, which frankly, most of them aren't overnight success stories. They haven't seen the come up, right? All the sacrifice. Or if it does seem like it's an overnight success, most of it's bullshit. Persevere. Like just get used to doing hard shit for really long amounts of time, right? And then the last part is self-awareness. Like you need to be your own biggest critic and like not tearing yourself down, not beating yourself up, but you need to be tough on yourself. Like, hey, I do this really well. This is bullshit. Cut that. Next time, sort that out, and have this reflection loop, and that feeds back into the curiosity. And I think if we have the four quadrants of business, I need to focus on the choke point of marketing, feed sales, into delivery, into growth, and then decide, do I take that money off the table or do I put that back into marketing and rinse and repeat? And then overlay that with the decision-making framework of the curiosity, the commitment, the perseverance, and the self-awareness. And how can you lose?
Very smart. What do you have like a philosophy in terms of, is there a certain profit margin that you should be taking off the table? Is there a certain point that you should be reinvesting it back in? Like from my own experience, it's just, I've been wearing all hats from day one essentially. And like, you know, every dollar that comes in is essentially ours as a family. And it's great because I can scale and build it that way and try and automate as much as I can. But at some point in time, when you're working with 200 plus businesses, it becomes a little overwhelming. And so then you do have to bring people in. And you know, as I built the business, I've struggled to go, well, you know, do I get some developers to buy back my time? Do I get a sales guy or an account manager to look after these guys? Am I going to lose that relationship with that client though if I get an account manager? Like you struggle with all these things.
Yeah.
Is there a point for you or a philosophy that you have around, okay, well, we should always maintain X amount of profitability. In the early days, we want to reinvest as much as we can back into the business. Like how do you kind of view that?
Yeah, so I've got a quantitative framework and then a qualitative overlay, right? Because it always comes down to trade-offs, okay? So I think that every business should have operating rules, right? And these are objective rules that we should use as benchmarks that we should measure our success against. So I aim for 30% compound annual growth. So I want my top line increasing by 30% year on year. It's very hard to sustain long term, but if you're kind of 7 figures, 8 figures, you should be able to continue to do that. Second, you need to have a 30% operating profit. And that's after you take a market wage from your business. A decent profit, I think, or a fair profit is 20%. A great profit is 30%. Any businesses that are more than 30% are either software, SaaS businesses, or there is tremendous amount of key person risk that the owners of the business should be outsourcing, right? Then the next part is cash to expenses. We want to make sure that we've got enough cash in the bank to cover 3 months of operating expenses in the business. So if your operating expenses, not including your cost of sale, is $100,000 a month, you need to have $300,000 in the bank. And then ideally, we want to then have some sort of moat. So our moat in our business is our recurring revenue to expenses ratio. And we want that at 130%. And what that means is that all of my recurring revenue produces my profit target, meaning that I can choose every single new client that comes into the business, assuming that they're a values fit. I don't need to let anybody in because I'm trying to hit my numbers.
Smart.
So then I look at that and then I say, okay, cool. Well, these are the objective numbers. These are my operating rules. Then everything else is a trade-off. So first trade-off is, okay, I'm in business because I want to live a great lifestyle. What is my freedom figure? How much do I need to live a great lifestyle and have ideally a 20% household surplus? So let's say my household living expenses is 100 grand a year. I need to produce 120,000 a year after tax. So I have a 20% surplus, which is for buffer, but also to allocate towards wealth creation, right? Anything more than that's cream. So then it's a matter of, okay, well, if I'm going to reinvest into the business, then what does that sacrifice have on my ability to produce that income, if any? General rule of thumb, what I do with my clients is I say, okay, assuming you've got your cash to expenses target hit, you should split your profit 50% to you and then 50% back into the business on the basis that you can develop an investment strategy that shows me that you can produce a risk-adjusted rate of return above 8%. And the reason for that is because we can go and put that money into an index fund, or we can go and buy a property and it will do 8%. So unless you can show me how you've reinvested that money back into your business, let's say, for example, if we've got a client that has an advertising campaign, what's the return on ad spend? So show me, okay, if you put in $1, is it going to produce 4? And if it does, perfect, great. That's a great return. You're not going to get that anywhere else. Or let's go and acquire a business. But if you're reinvesting back into your business, into bullshit, and you can't quantify an ROI, then we don't do it. So essentially that's the kind of decision-making framework.
Smart. I was going to ask, the next question I was going to ask is, well, when do you know it's time to take food off the table for other investments, like, the property side and the share side? And I think that's really smart. Like, if you can prove that you can get the 8% and you're actually building and creating the business, which is one of those 3 categories that you were talking about, yes, then that might be what you want to do. You want to continue to build the business and reinvest in that and earn wealth through that. But is there a certain point for you where you get like a business at a certain profitability, they're reinvesting and it's working quite well? Like, when do we take that food off the table to go, okay, now let's work on these other asset classes?
Yeah, as soon as possible.
Okay.
And I prioritize that first before you reinvest back into the business. And the reason for it is because cash flow operates on Parkinson's law. And Parkinson's law basically states that as a human being, we use the resources that we have available. So the more resource we have, the more resource we use. So this is like the old adage of, like, you're at school, you've got an assignment, you've got 8 weeks to do it. When would you do it?
I used to do it 2 weeks before because I'd know, but most people would do it the day before.
Exactly, right? You're a nerd.
True.
But if the teacher said it was a 4-week assignment, when would you do it?
Week 3.
There you go, right? So everything constrains, and so does money, to the resources that are available. So we've got to realize that as a business owner, the most money that you're ever going to have your grubby little hands on is in your business. It's just tremendous amount of cash flows, right? So if we allow Parkinson's law to creep in, you're always going to use more resource. And the best thing we can do is put your business on a diet. So we implement a structure that's called the profit mastery machine, where we force our clients to take money off the table, to pay themselves what they're worth, to create structure around their drawings. And then what we do is we create a forecast over the next 12 months that builds in what is the working capital required for them to invest into the things they want to do in their business, because the business should be able to fund it from its own steam. Like, we're not running Apple or a cash-eating startup here. For the vast majority of lifestyle businesses, they can be profitable, they can pay themselves well and to achieve their personal goals and build wealth and to grow their business simultaneously, assuming we've got the right plan. And then what we do is, and I guess the other benefit here is that if we can do that early enough, where you can prove that your business has been able to pay yourself well and you've been able to build wealth out of your business is more valuable because it's more profitable. And then we can then get to a point where typically most business owners, when they're in that 7 figures and above mark, we can start looking at acquisitions, where for some of our clients, if they make an acquisition, they could make, in some cases, 100% compound annual growth, and using the bank's money for something that they have full control over. Whereas, as we know, with property and shares, there's not a lot you can do to add value in the grand scheme of things. Whereas if you buy a good business, there's a ton you can do to add value.
Yeah, so true. One thing I love about you is, like, you rocked up. I didn't send you any prep. I didn't send you any questions. And you've been able to articulate and recite these models that you've obviously built over the last however long. I mean, obviously you've had the business for 7, but I'm sure it goes back further than that. And how many books have you written now?
5.
Okay. And the plan's to write how many?
100.
Yeah. So I can see that you're definitely going to be able to do it. But with the ability, and I know you've got an event this weekend, so you probably have prepped. And the last event, you were just as good. But how is this? You're either just like extremely passionate about everything that you do and just care about all of these things because you can tell. Or like, how are you able to articulate and recite these things? Is it through writing the books and you've got that quiet time to just go, hey, these are all the things that I've learned. I'm just going to jot them down. And then by going through that process of educating and teaching, you're able to recite it again. Or is it a combination of everything? Like you just generally love this. You do the books. You also speak to clients about it every single day. Like where does it all get stored?
I don't know. I'm kind of a big deal. No, I really love this stuff. I'm really passionate about it. And if I wasn't, I wouldn't do it. And I guess I've got a knack for seeing rather abstract things that exist in this space that we're in, because when we're dealing in business and all of these concepts, they can be really abstract. And for many people, they struggle to contextualize them to their own situation. And that's why they struggle to implement, because like, okay, I kind of understand it in theory, but how does it apply? And I've really tried to develop a name for myself of simplifying these models and making them easy to apply, so then people can get the value from them. So I don't think I'm a creator of anything, to be fair. Like I'm more of an innovator of a lot of these concepts of how do I take something and make it applicable to the types of people that I work with so they can accelerate their path. And that's something that I'm super curious about. And I spend a lot of time studying these subjects deeply and getting different perspectives, so then I can take those various views and then consolidate them into my own and then build my own models around it.
But you also do really well just to articulate it in a way that is, understandable for everyone and makes sense for everyone. You cut out all the crap and you just leave the core of like what is important. Even just like the different categories or the 4 things or the pillars of every business, like, they're simple in themselves, but for you to be able to recite, I don't know, like 5 or 6 things just off the whim, and be able to gently explain everything underneath, those things, but not go into too much fluff is crazy. Because I know you do like a lot of TikToks and like all that sort of, does that definitely help with that whole process?
Yeah, it helps. I think it really comes back to my parents. Like this is the value that I've held core to everything that I've done since I started, is that I still look at everything probably subconsciously now through the lens of how can I build this framework in a way that my parents could understand. And like my dad passed away in 2017, but mum's still around. And we still have conversations all of the time that she's like, I wish I could have had all this kind of knowledge when I was younger in business. And that still sticks with me. Like, I'm like, wow, how different could have my parents' lives been if somebody could have developed this kind of stuff for them. And that's rocket fuel for me. Particularly after I lost my dad, that was like the supercharger that I needed to kind of get my shit into gear and make a lifelong commitment to this. I've personally made a commitment I'm not going to have kids, and I've devoted my entire life to the development of this IP. This is my legacy. And that's a reason why I want to write 100 books. And sure, it's still ego, right? Because it makes me feel good, and I enjoy being known for these kinds of things. However, I know it can have a lot of impact. It can add a lot of value for people, and that's what drives me.
You say ego, but your goal could be, I want to be a #1 bestseller of this particular category, or like you could have a much bigger ego status goal. The fact that you just want to write 100 books just means you just want to provide as much value as you possibly can. So
100%.
I know you say ego, but there's a bit of humbleness in there as well.
Yeah, I like to think so. I try to do things for the right reason. And look, I've never been motivated by money or status or belongings. Like I'm a pretty down-to-earth person. And it's the big thing for me is proving the quality of my ideas in the world and seeing those theories manifest themselves in real results for people, and myself included. And like I'm 100% committed to the fact that I'll be immensely successful. My aim is to build $100 million business, and then once I get to 100 million, then let's chase the billy, right? But it's never about the money. I'm never going to be able to spend it. I've already got financial freedom at 35. Anything from here is just cream on top. So it's really about how can I test the bounds of my ability and see what impact I can have. So,
but you apply that in every area of your life. Like you've got the farm and you love that, and you love your animals. You've got the businesses and you do that, but you also just started doing the running, which blows my mind because I don't know. I was like 2 or 3 months ago. You're like, oh, I'm thinking about running. What shoes do you guys like, or what gear should I get to running? And then I see you like last week posting, oh yeah, just finished 100 Ks this week. Like you're a machine, mate.
I don't fuck around.
Yeah, I've noticed.
It's once again, this comes from my old man. And look, I think mindset plays a massive part in business. And one of the best fortunes and the best gifts that I ever had is I love my dad. He's my hero. But he was a dreamer. And he spent his entire life reflecting on the opportunities missed and the bad luck that he was dealt from cards that he'd been handed, and it disabled him from pursuing his fullest potential. He was incredibly intelligent. He could have achieved anything that he ever wanted, but he just lacked the follow through because he allowed the external circumstances that he was presented with to be used as an excuse. And when I come to that realization, I saw him on his deathbed at age 66 after working an entire lifetime slaving away, trying to create some level of freedom for himself. And I saw how much deep regret that he had about his life. That was just a catalyst for me. And anything that I'm passionate about or anything that I say I'm going to do, I commit to 100%. And it's just, because otherwise it's a wasted opportunity. Like I imagine myself being old and grey and broken and having little life left. And I never want to look back on my life and ponder the opportunities missed or the path not taken. I want to exhaust as many of those paths as I possibly can and see how far I can push it.
It sounds like one of those life events that just puts things in perspective. It's sad that your dad passed away, but it's also one of those moments where you can go, well, hey, like my dad was my age once and I'm going to pass away at some point in time. And so why not just live the best possible life that I can between now and then? I had the same moment with my daughter when she was born. Like I was 28, I think, or 29. And I was holding her in my arms and I was like, this was me 29 years ago. Like, how quick does life go? How crazy does it go? And then that's when I started the business, because I was like, well, I'm not just going to be an employee for the rest of my life. I want to do something. I love those pin drop moments in life, even though they can be amazing as having a child or as sad as losing a parent. Those moments are so critical, just to go, well, why not just go in and give it your all and try your hardest, because, mate, we're not going to be here for long.
Exactly. And that's the driving force. So, yeah, I'm currently training for my first 100-kilometre ultra marathon at the end of November.
Very nice.
Up Mount Kosciuszko, which is going to be fun. It's going to be excruciating, but it's going to be fun.
You just did your 60?
I did a 60-kilometre ultra in September.
Yeah. How'd you go?
Good. Did in 8 hours.
Okay.
So that was pretty good.
What were you aiming for?
That was exactly what I was aiming for.
Good.
8
Perfect.
hours. So I was bang on for that. And then prior to that, I did the Great Pyramid Race up in North Queensland, which is up this kind of big mountain that we've got up there. And I was targeting 2.5 hours, and I think I got it done in 2:03, which was
nice.
good. So it's been
great.
It's been just I love having something to work towards.
What's going through your head when you're running? Have you got a podcast on? Have you got music on? Have you thinking? Are you clear-minded?
It's a little bit of a mixture. So as I was kind of getting into running, I was listening to audiobooks and just trying to stay alive. So love audiobooks, philosophy, stoicism, that kind of stuff, biographies. And now that I've got my fitness up, I have actually just started recording voice notes while I run.
Nice.
So it's just, there's a thing about running that you have to be present, and there's a certain mental clarity that comes from it. And having the ability to just collate your thoughts and allow your mind to wander and just explore different things and just without distraction. Some of my deepest thoughts have come from running. I think that's probably the thing that I enjoy about it the most. Of course, there's a lot of physical benefits from it, but the mindset benefits that I've been able to get as a result, particularly trail running, has been phenomenal. So actually yesterday I was running 10K and I recorded for an hour just talking through and unpacking our entire marketing flywheel. Okay, how do I build a scalable marketing flywheel that takes all of the creative ideas out of my head, and I can build or scale our marketing team to be able to deliver upon it? So that was interesting.
But even just to think through that and talk it through yourself, regardless of if you ever listen to it again, or if anyone ever listens to it again, or if it gets turned into a book or whatever it might be.
It sounds really creepy to listen to it.
Yeah, I can imagine, because you'd be like, and then what we'll do is put ads on Facebook. But I think just the ability to think through that yourself is so much value, because you're actually talking through it yourself. And as you're talking through it, you go, oh, I haven't thought about that. Or I haven't thought about, we could add that. I think, like, I'm the same. Like, I can't run because I'm way too top heavy, but I'll go to the gym and that's like my mental clarity. But then I'll also go for a walk, and I prefer not to do anything while I walk. I prefer not to listen to music or listen to a podcast, because for whatever reason, the exact same thing is I just have this mental clarity and you just think through things, you think through issues, you think through problems. And it's the same with like when I used to code every day really heavily, I'd be stuck on a problem and I'd be coding and coding and coding. I couldn't figure it out. Spend hours and hours and hours and I'd give up. I'd go for a walk. And I tell you what, after about 25 minutes, I'd go, that's how you fix it. Or that's not what I'm thinking of. And you come straight back and you fix it straight away. And it's like, sometimes you just need some space and time with a clear mind, a clear head, get some fresh air, some exercise, just to think through everything and get that mental clarity.
I really agree. And this is probably one of my biggest bugbears in this kind of hustle movement, is that business owners work themselves too hard and they don't provide enough space for that mental clarity. It's just constant going and going and going. And I've been able to prove it, that time out of your business will translate to growth in your business. And it sounds counterintuitive, like, and particularly for people, and I talk to business owners about this all the time, like, I work 80 hours a week. The work needs to be done. And for many of our clients, we force them to work a 4-hour week and to take 8 weeks off a year. And we implement a system to help them get to that point. And they go, I don't know how I'm ever going to do that. Like, my business is going to be in a burning heap when I come back. Like, everything's going to come crashing down. And sure, shit will break. But I think the interesting thing, business is about enduring thousands of ego deaths. And you must recharge the batteries, because most people don't realize how physically and mentally exhausted they are until they actually take a break. And it's got to be a decent break. 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the sweet spot, I feel.
The thing that you said there, though, is so important. You said, and sure, shit will break. And I think some business owners actually need to break some things
100%.
To go, well, what's wrong with the business?
Yeah.
And when you're there and you're holding all the things up for all the plates and everything's running, you can't recognize it. It's actually okay to step back and let someone else spin the plates for a while and see which ones fall first, because you know, well, there's a big problem there and there's a big problem there. Let's go and address those. And you build the business up that way.
Yeah, and one of the systems that I do is before I take 2 weeks off after our intensive. We do an intensive every quarter. I take 2 weeks off. And before I go, I'll write up a bit of a document of what I think is going to break. And then I let it go, and then I wait and see what breaks. And one of the tools that we have is that when anybody has more than a couple of days off in the business, we send out a company-wide survey that basically everyone completes, and it's a leave survey. And it basically says, okay, who was away? How long were they away for? How would you feel if they took twice the amount of time away? What broke when they were away? What went really well while they were away? Because what's interesting is sometimes when I take time out, things go better. And then what would you change for next time? Would you want more support? Whatever it would be. And the amount of value that we've got from that. And once again, like, I think it's about accepting that you're the role of the problem solver in your business. So your job is to solve the biggest and most important problems. And the best way is for you to remove yourself from the process. See what breaks, come back.
Yeah, the reverse is just as true though. Like, what went better? What went well? What are you getting in the way of?
Exactly.
Like,
stay out.
Yeah, stay out of it and let the business roll. Mate, there's been so many little nuggets out of this. I'm excited to do the recap. It's probably going to be about 20 of them, but we've got a dinner to get to. Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on, and thanks for coming and say hi.
It's been great.
Speaking to us.